Real Talk is powered by Real Digital. If you work for a brand or agency producing content, keep it real by setting up a consultation at www.realdigital.media to see how your next campaign can come in ahead of schedule and under budget.
At the age of 38, comedian Jordan Peele released his first feature film, and in doing so seemed to not only create a new subgenre of horror, but he also earned so much credibility it seems few have questioned his decisions since. I should be clear that the subgenre I'm referring to is pop culture, camouflaged as representation, but packaged for casual moviegoers. I fully expect to receive a lot of pushback against my thoughts on the work of Jordan Peele and Get Out in particular, so let me be as clear as possible to not offend those assuming they need to interpret what's being said. I believe that presenting delusional elites as standard white culture is unfortunately racist, as it continues the seemingly endless trend of using race as a means to define characters while ignoring the larger culture of the affluent, which it's clearly depicting. Get Out presents a plot and characters that are clearly about class, but Peele grounds every moment in race, as if the script can't understand that culture is defined more by circumstance often than the color of flesh. I like the main character because I like the actor, and he's clearly doing as much as he can with the material, but I was constantly thinking as I watched, I would never do that. Lil Rel Howery plays Rod Williams, and although extremely entertaining and funny, seems to solely be a vessel to pump stereotypes into the story, and his constant reiteration that white people want sex slaves is a clue that Jordan Peele must have never been invited to any Diddy parties. I genuinely want to find out if Get Out contains any hope or messages beyond mongering racial tension, so I'm very glad that one of my best friends, editor-director Dominic Smith, has joined me today in the jungle to help me unpack this film that I recognize as a modern classic and resonates with millions of moviegoers. Dom, welcome back, and I just want to let you know, if they let lions vote, I would have voted for Obama twice.
So not a third term, you son of... Well, I guess I just had to cross the bridge of being a lion voting first. But you know what? If they let lions vote and they let Obama run again, you're gosh darn right he would get my technically first vote, I guess, in the way this is playing out. But regardless, he has my support. Anyway, Dom, thank you for coming here. Thank you for sitting through that very long opening that I wrote. I know that I'm coming into this one with a pretty specific take, and I have to imagine that there are people listening who might share that. But I know that years ago, closer to when this film came out, you and I had had discussions, and you had shared with me what it meant to you and what seeing someone like Jordan Peele operating in this space meant to you. So it was really important to me to have you on. Again, not so you have to defend the work, but just because I really love and value your opinion, and I want to hear what you think about this movie.
2017, I had created a Nightmare on Elm Street fan trailer series, and I was experiencing what it felt like to go through virality. Experiencing what that felt like and experiencing what you choosing to approach like a series like that and go with the lead black cast and like seeing what that response felt like. That was the head, just to give you guys a headspace of like where I was at. And I was getting maybe 10% negative comments, 90% positive, but I could only focus on the negative. And even in the mix of that was just, you know, some racist stuff as well. So it absolutely molded my mindset during 2017. So when I got to see Get Out, we didn't really have too many horror films with a black director and going with a black lead. And it's just kind of Afrocentric. All of those things made me feel seen as a black director. Not even feeling like I needed to create a film that was about the black, like a horror film that was about the black experience or anything like that. I just wanted to feel comfortable casting a black lead as a black director and that being okay. And immediately feeling this rush of people making me feel like it wasn't okay. And when I say like 10% of the comments were this, be mindful that I probably received maybe like 20,000 comments.
Yeah, well, I wanted to jump in and not to run it back too much. As a creator, to see somebody only have, you know, maybe 90 seconds to 2 minutes to kind of do something and present something, I've always been a big fan of it, and clearly it resonated with people because I remember when you put this out, it blew up overnight. So yeah, when Dom says 10%, he's being very kind. because we're talking about hundreds and hundreds of comments that were extremely ugly, and that's probably me being really, really kind. They were hateful and they were ignorant and they were wrong. And as someone who cares about you and cares about your work, I hated seeing that, and I can't imagine. I mean, it wasn't directed at me and it pissed me off. So I can't imagine what it would have made you feel like. So I think that's really important because that I don't, not when I say microcosmic, I just mean in sort of the world, you experiencing a specific event of putting out a trailer, releasing something, and you're experiencing this hate, that is reflective, unfortunately, of so many people's experience. So when you say that impacted how you viewed the film, I think that's really important because it's safe to say I don't know if Get Out was made for white lions. And if it resonated with you and made you feel heard and made you feel seen, I think that's really important because that's probably what it was intending to do. I think that's a great primer. Let's jump into it and talk about plot first.
There was so much about the initial plot before we get to experience what our twist is. And even the twist as an African American, I specifically have to say African American, so people fully understand. A lot of us more than likely felt that twist happening. The twist that we get is that Chris's girlfriend Rose is in on it. She does a very solid job of playing up to this idea that I didn't know, I didn't expect them to be this way, I didn't blah blah blah, and like they even set it up beautifully at the very beginning. He just flat out asked her, "You told your parents that I'm black, right?" That could come off as a very charged question, but when you grow up as a black man here, you have to ask that question. And I remember looking at my wife, who is a Czech, she is a Czech woman. She did not grow up here. She's only lived here for about 6-7 years. So a lot of our history she is learning through the eyes of me. And I told her that it's crazy because my experience with you wasn't the same as it has been as I've grown up in America and had a ton of white friends growing up. I'm not the person who's like, man, I got 2 white, like, no, I got a slew. So I've been in a scenario multiple times where I've gone to a white friend's house where I was the only black person. And before I went there, I would ask them if their parents knew that I was black. Because unfortunately, what happens is when those are your parents, sometimes you aren't able to see those subtleties because there's no reason for them to show those subtleties to you. And if they do, you may read them as something else that they aren't until a black person is there and they can let you know, this is how that made me feel. I don't know if this is what they were insinuating, but so kind of having us on the edge of our seats this entire time up until it's just completely revealed that, yeah, you're not getting the keys was terrifying.
I had a very different experience watching the Rose character because at no point did she seem sincere to me. From the beginning, and obviously I didn't even know what the setup of the movie was yet when that first time, but when you bring up that question, the way she's acting, which by the end of the movie makes perfect sense once you know the twist, but in the beginning, it felt so disconnected to me. I was like, this is either bad acting or there's something more going on here because they don't seem close. They don't seem connected. And dare I say that if we're looking at this movie through our kind of different experiences and lenses, that it might unfortunately be a little bit more of a part of your experience to see white people being inauthentic, and it might not seem as unnatural. Whereas to me, I immediately was like, this person is so unbelievably inauthentic. She's either a bad actor or there's something coming. When you say that, like, oh, it wasn't until she reveals the keys that you kind of had that real twist moment, because that's fascinating, because that was a real low point for me in the sense that I had just been waiting for them to get to it, because I was like, yeah, of course she's bad. But anyway, I digress. We are talking about the plot, so I want to keep it focused to that. You make a great point, though, how that moment in particular was really impactful for you. That's really kind of the moment where the hero, the main character, there's no more wondering what's going on. It's all about, at that point, getting out.
Man, I think it's also because like I grew up in a country where I just have been taught. I hate to talk about race so much, but that's what this film is about. And like I have been like forced to give white people the benefit of the doubt. I cannot say that I have never been in that situation. I have been in that situation a multitude of times trying to like walk on thin ice. Like, let me explain. There were so many times where Chris would say, "Oh, you're just gonna make a joke of it. Never mind." Been in that situation before because it took everything in me to speak up. And once I spoke up, you invalidated my feeling, whatever my gut reaction is. And now, because I don't want to seem like I'm making a big deal out of a situation, I kind of go back within myself and it's like, got it. Let me just like rework my mindset and make sure I'm not tripping. 3 different times in that movie, I watched him do that and immediately connected to that experience. My wife, she said to me at one point, she was like, yeah, I would have left. I would have got out of here. I can't tell you how many times I've been in a situation very similar to this before we even get into the science fiction aspect of it. People being this way in this, and like, let me also not make it seem like every single experience I've ever had with a group of white people where I was the only black person was like this, but I would say it's literally 50-50. The plot was extremely solid in showing this experience authentically.
It's awesome to hear that, because I sort of consume this movie again just as a horror movie, as a science fiction. I mean, it's not lost. I mean, the symbolism of the cotton in the ears, various things like that. Obviously, I'm aware enough and appreciate that, but I'm probably going to say this a lot. That's one of the reasons I'm really happy to be having this conversation with you, because you are shining a light on, again, a perspective that I just, I didn't have. All people win or lions when you are somewhere new, when you are around people that don't look like you. It's uncomfortable. Let's just say it as it is. It shouldn't be. This movie does really explore that feeling and that experience, and it heightens it so well. And I think that's maybe the issue I took with it, because if we're talking specifically about plot, I think what it ultimately, and I'm really editorializing here, devolves into, I think actually kind of robs it of what you're saying, like, again, it really evoked in you. And we'll come back to that. I want to know, though, 1 out of 10, what do we give the plot before we get into characters and performances?
10 out of 10.
10 out of 10. Boom. All right. Obviously, this movie is about the characters. It's like, it's so much, again, everything we're talking about is represented in these characters and who they are. Did you feel that the family was a fair representation of white culture? And as much as you're talking about how the film resonates with you and represents a really important part of the black culture, I guess that's where in my open, when I just look at this and go, I don't feel this has anything to do with white people. It has more to do with, specifically when I'm talking about the plot of the movie and the decisions they make, these are only things that wealthy people can do. And unfortunately, we've seen wealthy people do of all backgrounds.
Just like I mentioned to my wife, I was explaining to her how like black people aren't a monolith. Neither are white people. They come in very different experiences. But I will say, I'll have 3 different experiences if I'm in a situation where I am within a group of white people who I've never met before. It's my first time being introduced to them. I either experience they already have a bunch of very horrible examples of what they view a black person to be, and I get to experience whatever that is. Or I get to experience a group of people who will go overboard to try to prove to me that they're not racist by essentially just like naming a bunch of black shit. Jerome from when I was in high school, and like, man, he had dressed just like you. And I get it. They're trying to make this connection, and they'll try to tell jokes that are borderline racist, and then the third version, just regular people. And it's a regular experience, and they're not a try hard. They are just being authentically them. So those are the 3 different experiences I go through. So within this film, it was just showing you one version. So in my mind, it was authentic for that version. It wasn't really meant to speak for every experience.
And I think that's a really great way of putting it. And I certainly would not expect for the movie to try and show every shade of the, white experience, so to speak, if it wasn't a movie that was very clearly having a conversation about race and only presenting this one version. And unfortunately, again, Rose, the female character played by Allison Wilson, because she does a twist, you kind of get robbed of whatever maybe potential representation you felt like existed there if you are a white viewer. And what ends up happening as a result is I feel like the movie doesn't end up giving the viewer, or at least this viewer, a suggestion or an answer. It just sort of lets you revel in this sort of anger that it's sort of drummed up, and then gives you, again, a really violent, non-practical answer that I have no doubt leaves certain members of the audience as satisfied. But we have, Rod as he is, he's kind of constantly bringing up this white people, white people, white people. And I think you could very easily just throw in rich white people or these rich people or these whatever. And I think you still get all of the subtlety without this sort of what does unfortunately feel like, I'm not saying it was the intention, but it feels like finger pointing. And unfortunately, it feels like the movie kind of becomes an example of what it's saying shouldn't be done. And that's where I think there's this sort of tragic irony to what is a really well-made film, an incredible cast, really great actors. I mean, I want to be clear, my issues with this film lie solely with the sort of script. Characters and performances is what we're talking about. I want to make sure that's clear. I actually, I mentioned him in my open, Lil Rel Howery, who plays Rod Williams. He's fantastic in the movie. Again, I do think a lot of time in contemporary horror or even action and thriller movies, there's a little too much comedy. And I think he's almost too good at being funny in moments where I think we should maybe be settling a little bit more with the weight of what's going on. I think Bradley Whitford as Dean, who's sort of the evil dad in this movie, he's just always been amazing in everything he did. I was a lion who grew up in a house that watched a lot of West Wing, so I got a lot of love for Bradley. And Catherine Keener is in the movie, another sort of legendary actor.
Yeah, I think everybody did a phenomenal job. There's a real tough moment, and they're sitting there in the living room. My wife and I are watching it. And the dad goes on, he does his little spiel about deers and 100,000 of them. He's like, they're like rats, they're ruining the ecosystem. And every time I see a dead one on the side of the road, I think to myself, that's a start. And we cut to Chris. You can see the look on his face. And I look at my wife and she's like, yeah, man, just like the way that we treat deer. Now there's something that is being said there. And I was like, change the word deer with black, and I'm going to rewind it and have you watch it.
Yeah, this ain't about Bambi, baby.
And she looks at me and she's like, oh my God. I'm literally here dissecting every moment of his film. And I just wanted to make sure that you received it appropriately, how it was supposed to be presented. And also just how you can be in a situation where it feels like there's undertones happening that you may or may not be picking up on. Daniel Kaluuya's acting, his reacting was almost more explosive than the acting. Just watching how he received moments was just like, God, who are you? And then he was a kid, man. He looks like a kid when I watch it now.
He's so understated with everything that he does, and he has to do all this acting with his eyes because he can't really speak in these situations. And he has just these great eyes, and he does so much with this just Ninja Turtle strip. He's of band across his face, and he can express so much. And yeah, there's a lot of understated tension and things that are kind of presented early on, and I can see how, if you're just kind of casually viewing this, you could miss it. But even when he's giving the tour and he's mentioning the black mold, and there's just this, and what I'm trying to acknowledge is what I felt like was heavy-handed. But even what you're talking about, I mean, you have a wonderfully intelligent wife who's married to a black man, and you just missed it. Maybe do need that reiteration of the point to make sure that maybe they missed this part, but I want to catch them here, or I want to catch them here. Give your audience opportunities to catch something if they got up to go pee, or if they just missed something. So I do have to acknowledge in real time, as I kind of beat up a film for being heavy-handed, not everyone watching the movie is hosting a movie review podcast. They're maybe not looking at it quite as closely as I am.
That's the point, and how someone can be the way that you view it as heavy-handed, and someone who may have grown up around that energy isn't even picking it up. So it's, again, like, these things can be viewed as heavy-handed if you never choose to step outside your shoes and imagine how this is being received by the other person. The performances with the maid and the groundskeeper, those were very interesting to watch now that I know the story, because I remember first watching it and, like, you kind of just go through it trying to figure it out. When the maid is in the room and she's, like, explaining, like, her unplugging the phone, and you see her, like, have this struggle moment. If you've seen the film, now you know what's happening. This woman is trying to take back control of the steering wheel, and she kind of gets the steering wheel for like a second, and that's when that tear drops. Man, I watched that scene so differently. Same thing with the groundskeeper. Just the tonality. It sounds like an older white man, and I'm just like, did they possibly ADR this or something? Because it was a very solid performance for what we're supposed to receive in the end when we understand what's going on. I thought it was impressive. I really love the mom. Oh my God, I love her performance. She is impressively deceptive. She really kind of like tricks him into this moment. It's already begun and he doesn't even realize it yet. She has already started this process. And I thought there were just so many incredible performances.
I really appreciate the cast. I really appreciate what they're doing. I did not really have the same reactions, just in terms of mostly, again, Catherine Keener. I just felt like from the jump, there was something going on, and it just didn't. Even the hip. I mean, look, for those who have not seen the film, if you're still listening, the movie is kind of centered, in all Jordan Peele movies and a lot of contemporary horror movies kind of pick a very fantastic element, the new movie Weapons. As I hear, I'm just going to start spoiling a bunch of movies for people, but, Weapons is sort of a witch movie, if you will. This is a hypnosis movie. This is a movie about being able to mind control people. And I don't know. To me, she didn't really do it for me. She didn't give me enough of a sinister side. She didn't give me, I felt like even the handling of the hypnosis was kind of, I don't know, just throwaway. Like, there was enough of a consistency where it was like, okay, we as the audience know she's doing this now, but it didn't really seem to make any sense. For me, when I watched it, it just felt like it was happening because it had to happen for the story to move forward. And I felt like the actors were doing what they could, but it didn't really resonate with me. It didn't actually make me feel like anything other than I was just watching a movie, and I was watching these characters sort of tell us something that we had to get, because it was just missing that something for me.
The very true stereotype of just African Americans not really playing into the experience of therapy. And that's why I say she was very impressive in the way that she pulls him in, because if you have never gone through a therapy session before or anything, you don't know what it's supposed to feel like. And he has this moment where he's like, wait, did you start already? And by this point, she was already deep into the session and he didn't even know. It's drastically changing now, but we're in 2025. This was 2017. It just wasn't a big thing. You were just viewed as crazy if you felt like you needed to go see a therapist, unfortunately. So all of that played into my number, which is 10 out of 10.
10 out of 10, locked in for characters and performances. We're moving on to visual storytelling. I want to maybe take this opportunity to, again, talk about where the movie kind of falls apart a little bit for me. And that has to do with a lot of these very sincere, again, really important themes and ideas that are sort of brought up at the beginning. But once we start to get more into the horror or the fantasy aspect of it, to me, it loses the sincerity because all of these understated things, for example, the father talking about the deer, it sort of all of a sudden becomes very, very different. And you find out, oh, no, he is very racist and they're mining people and they have this whole thing. When you talk about the experience you have and how that feels familiar, I don't know. I feel like I would maybe be more interested in a movie that is trying to be about that experience and not then trying to run off into something else. Up until we get to kind of the third act, I was really jiving with this movie and the way it looked, and I was really on board. And then it just kind of really deteriorated for me into what I thought was visually just not up to par. What sort of the ideas that it was bringing.
I love this idea that he created of the sunken place because the sunken place symbolizes being a powerless passenger in your own life, a metaphor for the Black experience in America. The reality is, and I would say, like, man, I don't know where my mindset is today. I would have to really sit down and do some more internal work. But I grew up feeling like white people have control over me, control over where I get to be, where I can't be, even in a place where segregation doesn't like exist as a law anymore. There's just places where I would not be comfortable being because I don't know what can happen with me being there as a Black person for any reason. If it just looks like I'm not supposed to be there, I'm not supposed to belong there. With him creating this sunken place as this just like powerless passenger of your own body, it resonates strongly with me. Outside of us like having this wide shot where we see him kind of like moving, when we're just seeing his POV and it's a TV that you're watching and you don't really have full control over what happens. I love that aspect. I love the constant visual tension that they create throughout and all of these very unsettling moments. Just the isolation that they attempt to create visually within Chris. Like when he's in that room, just like those stats that they have around him and all of that. And for them, this is just like ping pong room or whatever. The moment with Chris and the brother, when they're all at dinner together, they're back and forth, and we no longer really acknowledge everybody else in the room. They keep everything really tight. I thought just really helped ground Chris's experience in all of this.
I will say I really did appreciate it is a really beautiful visual metaphor. Again, I think for me at that point I was still really into the film. That's still part where you don't know what things are, you don't know how they're going to pay off. And so yeah, that was probably, if I'm identifying one, probably the high point of the movie for me, the peak of where I was really with it. And then I think everything after that is sort of not up to that level, at least again from my opinion.
And I do remember feeling like the visual style altered once he had like escaped out of that room and he's like on trying to like get out. But it also felt like a reflection of the chaos that Chris is now experiencing. Everything is extremely cinematic up to that point of his escape. After that, even just the camera work feels as aggressive as Chris is in this moment. It's shot very differently than we filmed everything up to this point, but we also haven't gotten to see Chris be a beast, which is what he has become now in order for him to escape this place. So for me, visual storytelling is a 10. Also, shameless plug to Al sitting on the nightstick.
Yeah, I mean, look, let's get the elephant in the room, or maybe the lion in the room, out of the way. I was a little offended that, of course, all evil in this world was somehow represented by a plush lion doll. I don't get that. What's going on, gang? What's going on, Jordan? You couldn't find a North American animal to represent that? You can get like a polar bear or something? That was too on the nose. You had to go buy it anyway. I digress.
It is a African lion. They were like, we want to make him feel at home, so we will give him something of his motherland.
I appreciated it for what it was worth. We got that locked in, 10 out of 10 for visual storytelling. Let's move on to the use of sound. What'd you think of the use of sound, Dom?
In the opening, when our actor Lakeith Stanfield, very beginning, he's just kind of moving through this neighborhood, literally having a conversation I've totally had before, because again, I have been in areas that felt beyond my price range, and like that doesn't really have to do with, it doesn't have as much to do with classism as it does to do with just the race of it, even if there were black people living there, because they would even have this mindset of, the fuck you doing here, which hits even harder because there's just this idea of belonging and not belonging, and just being like the difference between, he was even dressed decently, you know what I mean? Like he's even dressed decently. And let me not get in the weeds. The use of sound, I love when he gets kidnapped and there's this track playing called Run Rabbit Run, which is very like straightforward for what we're getting to experience. And then we immediately go out of that into Childish Gambino's Stay Woke to kind of set the pace for the entire film. And just the sound design is very fun. I love the sound design for when we go into the sunken place. I love when she first sends him there and she's just like, sunk. And it just like drops to this deep tone. The teacup stirring for me kind of became a very unforgettable weapon for the entire film, where that kind of became a stamp.
Spoon stirring in the tea is sort of this form, is what's used in the movie as a catalyst for the mind control, and yeah, is one that is stuck with you. Don't stir your tea around Dom. That's the, or maybe you do, and maybe you'll immediately get control of him. Well, let us know in the comments if you've ever stirred your tea around Dom. 1 out of 10. What do you give it for use of sound?
I bet you could tell, but I'm gonna give it a 10.
10. I would have never guessed. Well, that brings us to our last category, Dom. I've really wanted to give you the floor, and you've really shared some amazing insights, and I have no doubt that you will continue to do the same when you talk about theme, which is why I just, again, want to reiterate that I think my issue with the picture is that it's almost a victim of its own success within itself. It's giving me so many moments, especially early on, where I'm like, this is a really talented, smart guy at the helm of this ship. And for me, again, thematically, it seemed very immediate and consistent to me throughout the whole movie what the theme is. Am I missing something that's maybe a little more hopeful? Is there a leg to stand on in that maybe the film could have offered something more than just an articulation and an expression of feeling, and more of something for the people who don't feel that way to take away and going, what can I do to help? We reviewed Malcolm X earlier this season, and there's a great scene where a lovely white woman walks up to Malcolm X and goes, what can we do to help? And he says, get out of the way. So this might be one of those moments where my white lion mouth needs to just shut up, feel it, take it on the chin, and maybe that's all this is. But I frame it as that because I'm just wondering, Dom, am I missing something? Is there maybe something more to it?
No, I honestly, I don't think that you're missing anything. I think in America, black people make up 13%. White people make up 63%. I grew up in a space where I didn't even fully feel that 13%, and I still had experiences like this. When I moved to Florida, that's when I really felt 13%. I felt tiny. I felt like there wasn't enough people around me who look, I mean, you know, we went to the same jungle college.
Yes, and I can confirm, Dom, I think because I think when we were there, we had about 103 students. I would be shocked if I can recall more than 6 black faces, and that's male and female, and that's stretched across my entire 4 years of being there. So, yeah, I mean, I can confirm for what it's worth. Yeah.
When you think about it from that perspective, and a filmmaker is trying to, at the very least, speak to as many people from that 13% as he possibly can, because so many of them will be able to relate. And if you start altering the film to fit within any of the 63%, it kind of takes away from that small group completely. And I think the goal would be to just receive and understand, got it. Y'all experience shit like this. Y'all experience stuff authentically just like this. The other note I have made explores both fear of being hated and being idolized. The America's duality towards blackness. Our history is rooted in a lot of hatred and then eventually growing into being supportive of like hip hop and the way that we dance and all of that, and just like them really creating horror out of that. They want to be in your skin and do all of these things that don't involve them having to deal with the consequences of this skin tone, because they still get to have the money and the placement that they are with all of that. And now they also get this extra stuff. The theme also hit very strong and it was very consistent. And so I ended up landing on a 10 out of 10 for that as well.
I have my scores locked in before we record. That's just how it goes.
Yeah.
I changed all my scores during our conversation because of your, I don't want to say argument, but of your side, like so what I'm going to do, because I don't have to reveal your score, it's 100 out of 100. You gave everything a 10 out of 10. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reveal what I gave this movie before we talked, and then I'm going to reveal what I gave the movie after.
This is interesting.
The plot, I originally gave it a 4 out of 10, and I think I did a pretty good job of explaining why and what my issues were, but that's what just kept pulling me out. There was a psychology missing for me that just never connected, and it always made me a viewer of the movie and not an experiencer of the movie. So I originally gave it a 4. I did actually end up bumping that up to a 6. I've kind of explained how, 5 is sort of neutral. That's why I bumped it down to a 4. But you made a lot of really good points, and you did highlight things that I didn't see. So I have to still plead ignorance on some things, but I bump it up to a 6 because I genuinely see the positive side of it now. Characters and performances, I had given it a 6. Again, that's positive, but I felt like, again, it comes back to the character psychology is what really fell apart for me in some of the swerves and the way things were set up. But I did bump it up to a 7 because you did also point out a lot of the kind of connective tissue between some of the black characters that I didn't, quite frankly, see. So I have to give it its flowers and acknowledge that it's better than I thought it was. Visual storytelling, I had given it a 5 to start with. I had just given it a totally neutral. There were things that I liked about it, but there are things I didn't like about it. Dom, you did way too good of a job gushing over, in particular, the sunken, I'm sorry, I'm botching it. The sunken zone. No, what was it called?
The sunken place.
The sunken place. Thank you. So I bumped it up to a 7. I felt like, again, I needed to give it its flowers. Use of sound, I had given a 7, but just by virtue of me saying it was my highest category, I had to bump it up because, then now all of a sudden it's not the highest category. So I gave it an 8. And then theme, and this is what I think is really important. This is where I really missed the boat. And so I had given it a 3. It's my rule on this show that if a movie is an example of what it's trying to discuss, it has to be a 10 out of 10. Dom, I trust you. I believe you. Everything you said and sort of answered me. I think Get Out is an example of what it's trying to be. I think that it is an expression. It is not a lesson. And I think that's the lesson that I learned in our discussion. I went from giving it a 3 in theme to giving it a 10. Before our discussion, I had given Get Out a 50, a neutral 50, which was a C, just a C that I gave it. And now it is a 76. So I'm going to give that a B plus from a C. And it's just not an A for me. And it's not to say that I don't think it is an A quality film, but if I am genuinely talking about my reaction, it just is not on par with the reaction I give for other movies. But I have to give the quality of the film its due, and I have to, of course, give you your due for doing such a great job of representing, again, what I clearly didn't get. And that's what I've really designed this show to be, is a space where people who love movies can come together and talk about what they love and hopefully get something else out of it. So all of that said, Dom, you gave it 100. That's an A+. I don't even have to ask. I gave it a 75 to a B+. Brother, I loved having you here. I hope you'll come back again to the jungle. And as is the case, we've linked your information and your website information in the description. And again, thank you so much, Dom. I'm trying to think of a Get Out related way to end this. So, hey, let's hop in this TSA car and ride into the hills, baby.
A black guy doesn't die in this movie.
Platinum Plastic isn't just a proud sponsor of Real Talk, they're also the home for all our new designs and merchandise. Follow Platinum Plastic on Redbubble to see all our A+ gear. That's Platinum Plastic on Redbubble for all your Real Talk merch.